Today on This Week in Iowa, reducing carbon emissions. We take a deep look at how it works and why developers and ethanol producers say it's the best shot we've got at seeing immediate change. But environmentalists aren't on board. Hear from the Sierra Club on why they say it's a bad idea. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. For This Week in Iowa, I'm Sabrina Ahmed. Two proposed pipelines intended to capture and permanently store millions of tons of carbon dioxide each year are making their ways through the channels. The Iowa Utilities Board is considering both of them, and the first is Summit Carbon Solutions. It's based an Iowa-based Summit Agricultural Group submitted this proposal earlier this year, back in August. Summit Carbon calls the project Midwest Carbon Express. If approved, this $4.5 billion project would cross 30 Iowa counties and 4 other states, including Minnesota, Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota. They're currently partnering with 31 ethanol plants across 5 states to capture the emission they would store underground in North Dakota. This would permanently store about 12 million tons of CO2 on an annual basis, which is the equivalent to about 2.6 million vehicles off the road every year. The project would connect all 12 of Iowa's ethanol plants. So how does this pipeline work? Well, once the CO2 is captured from the ethanol plants, it's compressed, transported via the pipeline to the injection site. The CO2 is then injected approximately a mile below ground. This pipeline is in the process of purchasing the rights to use land in Iowa and the other states. Okay, a second carbon dioxide pipeline is also going through the channels to come to the Hawkeye State. This one is led by Navigator CO2 Ventures. The 1,300-mile pipeline plans to bring about 80% of the proposed Heartland Greenway through Iowa. This pipeline will travel through 5 states as well before the CO2 is permanently sequestered underground, this in south central Illinois. Ethanol refineries and fertilizer plants will be the primary source of emissions that this pipeline will take and store, again, more than a mile beneath the Earth's surface. The project, also in its early stages, and if it is approved, wouldn't be operational for at least 3 more years. We know pipelines have a controversial past in the state of Iowa. Well, most of those controversies have surrounded oil pipelines, and the pipelines we're talking about today will move and store CO2, as I mentioned. But let's take a look back at that controversy. The Dakota Access Pipeline, or the Bakken Oil Pipeline, was proposed in 2014 to cross through Iowa diagonally from the northwest to the southeast corner of the state. The saga continues. Oil is currently pumping through the pipeline, but before it was constructed, Iowa community and environmental activists continually asked then Governor Terry Branstad to block the pipeline. He denied the request. Eminent domain then became an issue in gathering land. Farmers filed suits against the use of eminent domain. Eventually, after a number of court battles and even some environmentalists attempting to sabotage, vandalize, and set fire to the construction sites, the pipeline construction was completed and oil started pumping in 2017. But that's not the end of the story. A judge ordered the pipeline to stop pumping and empty. That was overturned by an appeals court. This is an ongoing environmental study of the fate of the pipeline hangs in the balance. But let's get back to CO2. We're not talking oil pipelines today. Up next, we go inside a partner ethanol plant, and we also talk to Summit Pipeline themselves, why they say this is an important step to reduce carbon in our state. This morning, we hear from one of those 2 pipeline companies that wants to sequester CO2, Summit Carbon Solutions. We hear more about how this works, why it's necessary, and talk about the concerns some have expressed about the pipeline going in.
We are developing the largest carbon capture and storage project in the world to connect to 31 ethanol plants or more and develop a CO2 capture, transportation, and storage project.
So basically, it's a pipeline that will collect CO2 emissions from ethanol plants and then store it underground.
Yeah, that's correct. So if you think about it, corn plants filter CO2 out of the atmosphere. They put it into the kernel. It's released during fermentation, at which point we're able to capture it. The thing is that you need specific, highly researched geologic formations in order to store the CO2 permanently underground. And although this is the Corn Belt, we produce a lot of corn and the most ethanol in the country right here in Iowa. We don't have those geologic formations here underground. So that's why we need to build the pipeline transportation system to connect the plants together and take it, in our case, up to North Dakota, where it's able to be stored permanently underground.
Interesting. So it's about the type of ground in North Dakota where it can be stored?
About the geology, more than a mile deep.
Is it safe?
It's absolutely safe. So interestingly enough, CO2 has been injected underground for about 40 years. There's 5,000 miles of CO2 pipelines in the United States, and it's actually been injected for permanent geologic storage in multiple locations in the U.S. and around the world. So it's been highly researched. It's been done for a long time, and the manner in which you do it, it's down there stored forever, so it won't ever leak back out.
Pipelines, when you say that term, can cause some differing viewpoints, and people immediately jump on the environmental impact that it could have with disrupting the soil, disrupting the tiling that's already in place, disrupting the land, and maybe giving it irreparable damage. Talk to me about the process of putting this pipeline in place.
Sure. So that's absolutely a consideration. And the interesting thing about Summit Carbon Solutions is we're part of a holding company that is an ag-based company. We're farmers and landowners, and we take great pride in knowing, the value of land and trying to do things that are going to enhance that over time. And so when we took a very close look at what was going to be the impact on tile specifically in the state of Iowa. So that's one of the reasons that we're going to bury the pipeline much deeper than is actually required, so that hopefully we'll be under a lot of the tiling systems in that situation. But when we approach landowners, it's key that they understand that we know we're coming in behind some projects that did damage and left a bad taste in a lot of landowners' mouths, and we have to follow up with that and exceed their expectations. So we remove topsoil, we set it aside. We remove the subsoil, we set that aside and keep it separated. We install the pipeline, we replace the subsoil, we replace the topsoil, we repair any drainage tile to exactly how the landowner wants it, as good or better than it was before. And that's our responsibility to ensure that is done properly.
And these farmers are being compensated. We've heard some conversation, though, about the potential use of eminent domain.
Sure, and that's an excellent question. There are a lot of misconceptions out there about eminent domain, the use of that in this project, as well as misinformation that's coming out around that. So I think it's important to understand that we're an Iowa-based company. We've got deep roots in agriculture. A lot of us are farmers and landowners, and we understand the value of farmland in Iowa, and I think that's a competitive advantage that we have, in that when we can go out to landowners with a competitive offer package that we know is going to work for them, then we're going to be able to sign up easements in that manner. There's a perception or a narrative out there that the pipeline company is expecting to get something from landowners for free, and if they don't give that to us, we're going to take it. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. So we pay market value for the land, and we pay 3 years of crop damages up front when an easement's signed. So they get a check for 100% of that. And when we go and talk to them, they say, wow, this is a really good deal. Let me take this, understand it, and they come back and sign up. And the proof of that is the fact that we've signed up dozens of easements every day. We have hundreds of offers outstanding with landowners. We are getting more signed easements that come in, and checks are going out the door every day. So it's actually going pretty well from acquiring a right-of-way standpoint.
So are there public dollars coming to this project as well?
Yeah, so from the revenue standpoint, we've got two revenue streams. The first one is called the Section 45Q tax credit. That's a tax credit for carbon capture and storage, and it's been around for a long time. It was enhanced in 2018 during the tax cuts, and now there's further enhancements as part of the reconciliation bill. Section 45Q has generally had a lot of bipartisan support, and that provides, and those enhancements provide an important source of revenue after we get started with the project for sequestering CO2. The other portion of revenue comes from the form of carbon credits that we're able to generate and sell.
So this whole project's going to cost $4.5 billion, and a lot of that's coming from fundraising, private fundraising. Summit Carbon Solutions currently employs about 25 people. They'll eventually employ about 250 to 300, but at the height of construction, they'll have about 15,000 employees working on the pipeline. Up next, who are the companies signing up to partner and why? We sit down with one next. So who are these ethanol producers who are partnering with the pipeline? I went inside Lincoln Way Energy in Nevada and spoke to the CEO about why he's joining in the venture.
We're in Nevada, Iowa, at the Nevada ethanol plant. That's Lincoln Way Energy, and we produce about 85 million gallons of ethanol a year. To do that, we grind about 80,000 bushels a day, and we produce about 510 tons a day of distiller's grain that goes into animal feed. And we also produce compressed carbon dioxide already, where we take our carbon dioxide off our fermentation operation and we clean it and compress it, and it goes to the water treatment facilities at the municipalities in the region, including West Des Moines. So they use it to clean the water down there, and then they also use it in their water treatment facility to clean up their dirty water. And then we also sell it to the Hormel packing plant over here, and they use it to cool and freeze the meats that are consumed.
So if you are already finding use for your carbon dioxide, why join this pipeline?
Well, because that's a limited market, and we really feel like the world is changing quite a bit. And I don't want to get on one side or the other with climate change. I think we all know something's changing, and I think over time we don't want to look back and say, did we do everything that we could possibly do? And so this is a great opportunity for ethanol to step up and say, okay, we're not against electric vehicles, but when you look at what it's going to take to electrify all the transportation in our nation, those 5.2 billion kilowatts are going to be tough to come by. And we're saying as ethanol, wait a minute, we're a low carbon fuel already. And so we feel like with this project, this will help us become a net negative, carbon sink, really. The corn plant, working in conjunction with the sun and photosynthesis and our plant, we're taking those molecules and making a truly low carbon fuel. And with this final piece of the project, with the Summit people in the pipeline, we're able to take what's left of the carbon dioxide or the carbon when we process and put that in the ground and truly become a net neutral or even potentially a carbon sink. We're working on some technologies today to run the plant on some renewable energies, and we're using some recycled energies in the plant, and we're doing some stuff where we use, today we're using natural gas to produce steam, but we're also going to use that in a step-down fashion. So when we produce steam, we're also going to use the steam to produce electricity and then use the leftover steam in the plant. So that's going to lower our carbon score as well. And so we're participants in the low carbon fuels markets in California. Ethanol by itself has a 46% drop in the carbon score compared to gasoline on today's market. And so we think with this project it could go much further. So we're really excited about all the technologies that are coming about.
So you mentioned electric vehicles. That is the way of the future. We keep seeing more electric vehicles coming out frequently. Does that concern you as an ethanol producer?
I think we're all in this environment thing together. I think that it's going to take whatever it takes to get there. I mean, when you think about the probabilities of what could happen if we're not careful with this, and those that think that, and again, I don't want to get into a big debate about climate change. I think everybody needs to be a part of the solution. I just think at this point in time, we are really the low carbon solution. When you take the 5.2 billion kilowatt hours it's going to take to electrify the entire transportation grid. That's over 1.1 million wind towers, or it's several hundred thousand 5 meg solar fields. When you think about the setbacks of 300 to 500 feet for each wind tower, and you take 1.1 million towers to power all these cars, that's a lot of wind towers, that's a lot of solar power. And after that, you know, outside of nuclear power, we're starting to run out of low carbon sources to make that electricity.
What would you say to someone who says ethanol was meant to be a transitional fuel and it is not the way? Sure, it's the way now, but it's not the way of the future, and investing this much money in something that will prolong it is not going to benefit Iowans in the long run?
I would say that we have a proven track record and that we are continuing to drop our carbon score. We're continuing to increase our efficiency. And why is ethanol not the way of the future would be my question to them.
Well, not everyone's on board with this pipeline. I talked to an environmentalist group about why they think the pipeline is the wrong move for a number of reasons. Next on This Week in Iowa. Environmentalists are concerned about the project for a number of reasons, and I spoke to the Sierra Club Iowa chapter about those concerns. Again, they say this project is investing in the wrong things to decrease our carbon footprint.
I am here now with Jess Mazur, who is with the Sierra Club Iowa chapter. Jess, thank you so much for being with us as we are talking about these carbon pipelines potentially coming into Iowa. Jess, first of all, talk to me about what you do, what the Sierra Club does, and what the Sierra Club stance is on these carbon pipelines.
Yeah, well, here at the Sierra Club Iowa chapter, our mission is to enhance and protect the environment. And so we work on a lot of things that have to do with climate and water quality and air quality, agriculture, and elections even, because that impacts the environment as well. But the most recent thing we've been working on is these 2 proposed carbon pipelines that are coming through Iowa. And we have some major concerns about their impact on our water, on our land, and that they're a false solution for climate change.
Okay, so talk to me about some of those concerns that you have with these carbon pipelines. What are you concerned about? Why? And what do you think is a better solution?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think there's a lot of reasons that people are against this pipeline. If we want to look at some of the environmental angles, we know that pipeline destruction or pipeline construction permanently damages land, our farmland. They compact the soil, they dig in unsafe conditions, they break tile lines and they're not hooked up, creating drainage problems. And so that's a huge concern when this is going across Iowa farmland. We also have major concerns because highly pressurized CO2, when it touches water, it creates carbonic acid. And that could poison our water. It could acidify our water, our aquifers, our rivers, our lakes. It could acidify our soil if there was a rupture. So we have major concerns about that. We also believe that, these pipelines are not a climate solution. We know that $4.5 billion would be better spent on known climate solutions like wind and solar and battery storage, but instead they're being used to not only extend the life of ethanol, but expand ethanol. And that's not what we need here in Iowa, because ethanol was never meant to be a forever fuel. It was designed in the beginning to be a transition fuel as we weaned ourselves off of fossil fuels. And this pipeline actually expands the industry, creates a huge investment, and it doesn't actually mitigate all of the problems with ethanol production. And there's a lot of problems with ethanol production that impact our environment, like the massive amounts of water required to produce ethanol from our aquifers, the way that we have to do intensive row crop farming that destroys our soil. We're seeing CO2 actually escape from the ground as we till our soil, and we have massive erosion problems. And CCS technology doesn't capture every emission that comes from an ethanol plant. It captures some. So I think that there are much better solutions to climate change than these pipelines. I think these are, actually another really big concern is that they require public money to be built. This can't be built without our money and our land. And that's for Bruce Rastetter and Summit and Navigator's private profits. And we have some major concerns with that because we know how money should be spent if we really want to tackle our climate crisis. And this is not it. This is a greenwashing scheme.
But a huge portion of Iowa's economy, the way these farmers survive is by having ethanol production in our state. And if we are going toward a more greener society and there are these emissions limits that are put on these ethanol plants, and this is the only way for them to continue, without these, there's potential that these farmers won't survive, and that would be detrimental to Iowa's economy.
Yeah, I think that's what Summit is trying to tell us. But, I've been thinking about this differently. And I've also been working with quite a few farmers who are directly impacted by these pipelines and who make their living off of growing corn and beans. But they see past that. And this wasn't supposed to be a forever fuel. It is inevitable that our vehicle fleet is transitioning to electric vehicles, especially in states like California, where they're hoping to expand this ethanol market into California. So what happens when the demand for ethanol decreases because our vehicle fleet has gone to be electric? That means there's going to be a decrease in the demand for ethanol. There's going to be a decrease in the price for corn. And then we just asked all of Iowa's farmers to put all of their eggs in the corn and ethanol basket. And that's going to be what's devastating to our farmers. So the big question really is what is the future of agriculture? Is the future of agriculture lively rural towns, farmers who are making a living wage, our land that's being taken care of where we're growing food, or is the future of farming ethanol and pipelines? That's what the bottom line comes down to. And when we know that our economy is changing and the demand for ethanol will decrease, we really shouldn't be asking our farmers to put all of their eggs in that basket. We're actually putting them in harm's way in the long term.
Jess, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.